And welcome back to the Today with Tally podcast. Folks, we have a great show in store for you today. We sit down with a retired U.S. Navy Rear Admiral. Now, his name is Chuck Kubic. Now, a little bit about his background here. He helped oversee the construction of over 145 miles of border wall in California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. Now, Admiral Kubic has a strong record of combat leadership within the Navy and Marine Corps and has commanded Navy Seabees at the company, detachment, battalion, regiment, brigade, and division levels. From 2002 and 2004, he served concurrently as commander of the 1st Naval Construction Seabee Division of the 1st MEF Marine Expeditionary Force Engineer Group during Operation Iraqi Freedom, as chronicled in his book, Bridges to Baghdad. In 2016, Chuck was asked to serve as a national security policy advisor to Donald Trump and was later appointed to his National Security Advisory Council. He advocated Mr. Trump's intent to sustain peace through strength in print, TV, and radio media, as a surrogate at the Cleveland Convention and as an active campaign spokesman. He also authored numerous issue and briefing papers, was an articulate advocate for rebuilding the U.S. military and refocusing U.S. foreign policy, and has practical national security experience as a military leader and international businessman. In 1985, he was selected as a White House Fellow and served on the staff of President Reagan's Domestic Policy Council. He currently serves as the national spokesman for Veterans for America First. And with that, we are honored to be joined by the Admiral himself, Chuck Kubic. How are you, sir?
Hey, doing just fine, Brian. Good morning. Great to be with you.
Absolutely. You know, we've got 22 days until the election. Of course, it seems like for the last, decade or so, they keep saying that it's the most important election of our lifetime. And they're saying that once again, but I think this time it's actually for real. This is the most important election in our nation's history. Would you agree, Admiral?
Absolutely, but I'm going to have to say it's 21 days and a wake up.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, I like that. 21 and a wake up.
And I hope a lot of our veterans have already voted and are volunteering to be at the polls, either as poll watchers, poll workers, or just passing out poll literature, because we need this to be an all hands effort.
Too big to rig is what I have been hearing. Everybody on the right side of history here is going to do whatever they can to get out there and put a lot of eyes and ears out on all these voting polls to ensure that we do have election integrity, as well as, hey, look, we need to make sure that there's no cheating going on here. I mean, this constitutional republic is a thread pull away from utter collapse. And, without that transparency there, I mean, are we even a nation at this point?
Well, absolutely. There's a lot been said about the rigging of the 2020 election, but they always mince words. They say there was not evidence of significant fraud sufficient to have changed the election results. So what they're saying is there was some fraud, that did impact the election results. They're just mincing the words that, in their opinion, it wasn't significant and it wasn't sufficient. They'll never say there was no election fraud. Never hear anybody saying that. And so this time, I think we're out in front of it, particularly under the leadership of Chairman Whatley and Co-Chairman Whatley, Co-Chairman Lara Trump, who, and again, a lot of the folks that are volunteering are veterans, and we encourage more because we've got to have eyes on this one.
Absolutely. I could not agree more with you, Admiral. And it just doesn't seem like whatever we do, the left always has a counterplay. They are so strategic. They're crazy, but they're very strategic. They may play these games to where they try to act dumb or, like you say, mince words and stuff like this. But these folks have plays out there that we have no idea on what they're going to do yet. And it seems as if our side is always playing catch up and always playing defense. And you can
it's easier for them to control their electorate. First of all, they're used to being taken care of by the government. But just think about it. They only have to control the vote in 7 cities to affect senatorial elections and the presidential, and that's Philadelphia, Detroit, Milwaukee, Charlotte, Atlanta, Phoenix, and Las Vegas. Because in those states, the big city vote, which they control with their political machine, can basically wait until the last minute. They know how many ballots they're short, and they can basically put them in under names of everybody who either hasn't voted or who is registered and no longer in the state or may already be passed away. So they play that card very well, and the only way to play against it is to get into the city and, as Trump says, swamp the vote, too big to rig, all of that, because it's like playing an away game where the refs are homers. You have to be good enough to win, notwithstanding bad calls. And I think that's what we're facing. We realize it this year, and I think we're on top of it, but we can expect that they will continue to find ways to stuff, ballot boxes, notwithstanding, all the effort that's gone into it. And that's why, from a Republican campaign standpoint, they already have a legion of lawyers that are standing by to not wait until after the votes are counted to raise any kind of questions. But as soon as somebody sees some sort of funny business going on, they're going to show up right there on election day and basically contest what's going on. So it promises to be, a real sporty election, let me tell you.
And I can't see, unfortunately, I can't see anything good coming out of the election either way you look at it. Now, what I mean by seeing anything good is if Trump wins, they're going to say it's rigged. If, Kamala wins, they're going to say it's rigged. Things are going to burn. It's the same song and dance that we've seen in this country over the last 4, 5, 6 years when it comes to anarchists going out there and ruling the roost, and having so many of these liberal governors and mayors just allowing folks to go out there and burn it down and standing down and watching police stations burn and Capitol buildings be absolutely destroyed, from Denver to Minneapolis, from sea to shining sea. And what are your thoughts on Election Day and the days that may come to follow?
One thing you can be sure of, they'll blame it on Trump. It's going to be his fault. But I think what is happening here, in America is that, it has kind of crept up on us, but we're under attack. Our security is under attack. Our economy is under attack. Our culture is under attack. And even our Constitution is under attack. Mm-hmm. And all of this is part of, it's almost too polite to call them liberals or progressives. I think, we've started calling them, Marxist or communist, or my favorite is that they are fascist oligarchs. But they control a lot of these folks who are basically living within an illusionary bubble that they've created. And they use this as the basis of their power. And yes, we can probably expect some of that, but I think what's happening to the vast majority, well, I can't say vast majority, let's say at least 51% in America, they're becoming exposed. They used to be able to do this under the cover of darkness in the back smoke-filled rooms, as a part of, a smoke and mirrors attack on America. They can't do it anymore. They're being exposed, and they're being exposed even face-to-face when we have our liberal commentators and pseudo journalists taking on people, like J.D. Vance and others who basically don't tolerate their BS. And so Americans are starting to see that. And I think that's our great hope, that there are enough people who are basically realizing that what they're offering is merely an illusion. And every time Trump comes out with something, they say, hey, me too, we're going to do that. But it's an illusion. And what I think is happening here is the real world is popping their illusionary bubble right now. The idea of wars in the Ukraine, wars in the Middle East, back-to-back hurricanes, all of these things which require strong central leadership, of a democratic, populace, they don't know how to do it. And it's all starting to crumble on them. I would not be a bit surprised if we see some other unplanned event that just takes place in the world that exposes the fact that they are not prepared to lead. And I think that's really what America is looking for now. And they try to, talk their way out of their failures of leadership by saying Trump would be a dictator. Well, he was here for 4 years. He was anything but a dictator. And when he jokes, he says, I'm going to maybe be a dictator one day so I can sign all of these executive orders. Then they just keep jumping on it. But again, they are the ones who I fear will become the dictators. Because if you look at it right now, what they do is they want a strong central government that can rule, the population. That's why they want to get rid of the electoral college. They would just as soon get rid of the Bill of Rights if they could and rule from that strong. And the way they get around the Bill of Rights now is they basically let their friends in the oligarchs, I call them, in both the media and in business and in IT and all of that, they can do their dirty work. They can get around the First Amendment. They can start to get around the Second Amendment. And so they're working together to basically set up a control mechanism where our Constitution never saw it that way. We saw ourselves as a unified group of states wanting some sort of a federal government that was stronger than the Articles of Confederation. But we fought back and forth between the Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. The Federalists wanted everything to be done in Washington, or at the time in Philadelphia, as a strong central government. The Anti-Federalists said, no, we still want to be a confederation of states. And what settled it was the Bill of Rights. And the way the Constitution was actually ratified was by promising to bring in the Bill of Rights, including the 10th Amendment, which guaranteed that only those powers delegated to the central government would be, their base of power. Everything else would be done by the states. And that's what they don't like. That's why they want to have the popular vote. They want to be able to control America from 7 cities. And maybe throw in New York and Los Angeles, and Chicago as well, 10 cities, and they can do it. And the rest of us will just become, servants to this strong central government. And that's what's really at stake. And I think people are seeing it. They want to be able to be free. They want to be able to do their own thing. They want a government that takes care of those things that the government does and then stays out of our lives after that. They want to get into our lives and tell us how to run things, on a day-to-day basis. And I think people are beginning to see this, particularly veterans who are used to being a part of a regimented organization while still retaining their own individual rights.
Sure. You played a monumental role on the border, during the Trump administration. Over 145 miles of border wall that you oversaw. What was that experience like, being on the border and building Trump's wall?
Well, it was a little bit surreal at times. We actually had firefights with the cartels. They didn't like what was happening, at all. And but when we finished the first section, and by the way, the true wall is a double wall where you have an 18-foot wall, 6 feet of concrete under it, so it's already easy to tunnel into it, 150 feet of an entrapment zone with cameras and lights and security sensors, and then a 30-foot wall. When we finished that section of the wall, it ran from the Pacific Ocean into the mountains east of San Diego, right along the border, with Tijuana. The Border Patrol immediately said we can transfer 126 agents to other work. And so it was very rewarding to see, how effective it was. But at the same time, there were a lot of forces working against us, working within, the government of the U.S. in terms of people who are committed to trying to stop this in the deep state. So we continually had contractual issues, other sorts of things that we had to had to fight against. But the work was very rewarding, particularly when you saw our workforce. You know, I would venture to say probably 75 to 80% of our workforce were fourth and fifth generation Hispanic Americans. And they were so proud of the work that they were doing. And by the way, they were making good money because we were working extended hours. They were getting overtime. I know one of our skilled tracked excavator operators said that he could now send his kids to college because of the job he had. A guy who was driving a concrete truck told me that when his dad found that he was supporting building of the wall, he was so proud that he went around and bragged to all of his friends that his son was helping to build the wall. The support from the people was unanimous. The resistance of the government, the deep state of the government and the cartels was fierce at times.
You had mentioned firefights on the border when you guys were out there constructing this border wall. Who was there to back you guys up? Was it the border?
We hired our own private security, and they were armed, you know, on our side, and we were also able indirectly to through a U.S. company to subcontract, you know, Mexican security federales who were actually working, you know, off shift, you know, as security guards. So we basically had armed security working for us on both sides of the border in certain hotspots.
So how did it make you feel after Trump left in 2021 and you seen our border literally just collapse and our nation's sovereignty disappear literally overnight as 20 million illegal aliens have poured over our border over the last 3 years and 8 months? Very little unvetted, unchecked, and again, coming into the greatest country in the history of the world after all the work that you have done for them to literally open the floodgates and have everybody go through like it's turnstiles at a ball game.
Well, first of all, from a business standpoint, it was basically a disaster. In fact, even to this day, our lawyers are still fighting with government lawyers to make sure we get paid, you know, for some of this stuff. But from a human standpoint, it was even more tragic. I can remember I was taking people to the border, particularly politicians and others, and you'd always have to go at night to be able to see what was really happening. And we were in Texas, and we were also armed, you know, because of the danger there. And seeing a group of migrants come across, and particularly a number of what I would call young kids. And you know, I went up, and there's probably 12 or 15 of them sitting very cold, you know, they're waiting for a bus to pick them up. And in my, you know, limited Spanish was just talking to them, talking to particularly the young boys to get their ages. They were about 15, between 15 and 17. Two of them were brothers. You know, I asked them, you know, where their mother and father were. They kind of swelled up in their eyes, and they basically said they didn't know where they were. And then there was a 12-year-old girl who was unwilling to talk. She was completely traumatized, no telling what had happened to her. When you see these kids there, it was just unbelievable. There was also I would say a middle-aged, you know, man, maybe 45, who had been shot in the leg. And what the cartels did was that when you paid, it was a $10,000 fee. You gave them $5,000. They gave you a wristband. That gave you 3 tries to get in. And if you came back and wanted to go and didn't have your wristband still, you would then, you know, have to pay again. Well, what the Border Patrol finally realized, started cutting the wristbands off. This guy tried to come across without a wristband. They shot him in the leg. He was being treated. And then there were families that were being pulled, at least they appeared to be families, off by the NGOs and taken off, you know, at your expense, you know, to be able to be processed into the U.S. But the human tragedy was stark. It was daily, and it was just overt. What they told me the Border Patrol was, it was putting such a strain on them, particularly if they had a shift change at midnight, and all of a sudden they saw people massing at a certain spot, and they would have to extend the shift and bring another shift in early to be able to handle it. And their agents are getting worn out. Their families were getting, upset. So finally, the cartel showed themselves to be what they were, a boutique illegal travel agency. And they started calling the Border Patrol and saying, we're going to have a certain crossing of 100 people at this location at midnight. And then the Border Patrol would get it. They know where to move their people to. But meanwhile, upstream, they'd be bringing drugs across and there's nobody there to stop them. So all of that stuff that you hear, is true. And it started happening, immediately after, Biden took over and terminated our contracts to build the wall, because there was a lot of wall that was planned. We had, I said, about 167 miles under contract. We got 145 built. Collectively, we had about 450 built between 4 contractors. The goal was to get to 700, which would basically have stopped the main areas. And all that funding was just kind of available, but it was at that point in time, stopped, and there was nothing going on after that. So again, Trump was well on the way to getting that border completely sealed, and Biden and Harris basically consciously opened it up. And we have what we have today because, of their selling out of America.
What is the motivation here? This is what I don't. And there's people that talk about, it's the New World Order, it's this, it's that. What is the motivation of the federal government to literally remove our sovereignty from our nation? To me, to the regular old citizen of this country, it makes no sense. Like, what is the motivation here?
Well, first of all, there is a strong motivation from the cartels to push people this way because they're making a lot of money on it. As I said, they pay $5,000 up front. Eventually, when they get settled, the cartel is making them work off the other $5,000 one way, or another. And so there's a strong push. The problem is that Harris and Biden created a pool. So all of a sudden they decided it was humane to take care of these refugees. So they started pumping money into these various nonprofits, who then, quote, nonprofits were making huge amounts of money, paying themselves huge salaries to be able to move these people all over the United States. Then, of course, in doing that, in the long term, the Democrats see that they're basically bringing potential voters into the country. The oligarchs see them as a cheap labor that they can go on, and mixed in the middle of this are a lot of people who really are looking for the American dream, but also a lot of people who are looking to do criminal activity. So there's a whole lot of mixed motives that kind of synchronize and basically say, now is the time to get into the U.S. because once we're here, they'll never figure out how to send us home, and we'll be there. And again, the attraction of all of this money to show up and get a place to stay, free food, bus tickets, plane tickets, it was really hard for anybody to pass up. And it was all being facilitated by this, kind of unholy alliance between the cartels and the NGOs, in my opinion. And it was then being looked at politically as advantageous to people looking for cheap labor and people looking for confirmed votes.
Like you were saying, potential terrorists, pouring across the border, you don't know. It's kind of like that bag of Skittles, right? The red ones are the terrorists, right? But you don't know how many are coming across the border. You've got literally millions of folks over the last nearly 4 years that have infiltrated this country. We don't know where they're at. We don't know what their intentions are. What, in your eyes, in your thoughts, and in your opinion, what would a potential terrorist attack look like in the United States now?
I have an idea of what would be the worst attack, but I'm reluctant to say it, on here, just to give somebody an idea. But if you want to look at where we have huge vulnerabilities that could have an unbelievably devastating impact on America, take a look at our elementary schoolyards as kids are, getting off the bus, being dropped off by their parents, milling around outside, waiting to go into school. And you look at that, and you've got to say, we have a vulnerability that we still have yet to come to a consensus as to how to protect those kids. But we have lots of those vulnerabilities in America that if you have, all you need are, 4-man hit squads to show up with automatic weapons. Pick a place, whether it's a shopping mall, whether it's a church, whether it's a school, whether it's an outdoor concert. And if those things can be synchronized, you don't have to fly airplanes into buildings anymore to have a major terrorist impact on America. And so we are all threatened. As I said, earlier, our security is under attack, both from within and from abroad. And we don't seem to be willing to acknowledge it or pay attention to it. And certainly our president and vice president and secretary of defense and secretary of state, secretary of homeland security don't have a clue, as to what to do in that case. And that brings us to the big question of what does Trump need to do, right there the day after he's inaugurated. He needs to clean out defense, state, and homeland security, I'm going to say 3 levels deep, and quickly place, new people in those slots to basically begin to reestablish our security. And in doing that, he needs to get them confirmed by the Senate, which then says, as we look at 21 days and a wake up, we've got to almost begin to think that focus needs to go on to these senatorial races. We have limited time, limited money. Trump is off, to a really good upward slope. The House is still somewhat of a question mark, but I think the local representatives are doing, the candidates are doing well. But 51-49 is not going to be good enough in the Senate, because we've got guys like Romney hanging around and things like that. We need, I'm going to say, as a minimum 54-46, or better. And so we've got to start thinking about that. I know that in the races, even our race here in Virginia, with retired Navy Captain Hung Kao challenging Tim Kaine, he's putting up a good fight. He's getting close, but it's hard for him to get money to run ads, whereas Tim Kaine has got the oligarchs behind him, funding all sorts of ads. And so we need to be thinking, particularly as veterans, what we can do to help, swing some of these key senatorial races, because otherwise we'll elect Trump, we'll have a majority in the House, and we won't be able to get anything through the Senate. And they'll keep trying to impeach Trump possibly, but we've got to get the Senate, and we've got to get a new majority leader, who is tough and aggressive and can basically push things through the Senate. That's one of the things where Kamala keeps getting a free pass. She keeps talking about what she did as breaking tie votes and how Trump shut down her border bill or whatever. To me, I would ask her, you are the president of the Senate, in our Constitution. You mean to tell me you weren't good enough to get enough Senate votes to pass your most important election? Seems to me like you failed as president of the Senate. Now you want to be president of the United States. And I don't see anybody pointing that out. They're letting her get credit for breaking tie votes, but she basically did a crap job as president of the Senate if you're a Democrat, because she couldn't get your stuff through. As a Republican, we're happy to have her do a crap job as president of the Senate. Yeah. But she really was, in any position she's been in, she just is, she's not smart and she's not a hard worker.
She has not contributed to anything. And she can't even give a simple interview, without word salad. And I just heard another one that she did last night, and I'm like, how is this even possible?
Well, the real problem is, I think, is that we're now learning that her earrings are Bluetooth, mics. She's being told what to say, and she's being fed by one. They have these huge teleprompters that they sit on the floor. Even Trump and others use them in the White House. So when they're talking to a group of people, you don't have the little glass things up on the stage. They're sitting on the floor. And so somebody's trying to type the answer, talk into her ear. Meanwhile, she's just kind of throwing out word salad because she doesn't know how to put it all together. And so I think, that's ultimately being exposed here, that she doesn't know enough to be able to articulate a consistent program other than to keep saying, well, if Trump's doing it, I'm going to do it too. And to try to deny that the change is going to Trump, as opposed to she wants to say, well, we're going to give a new way forward. Do you know where the words new way forward came from? Karl Marx. Karl Marx promised a new way forward, as well. And that's the illusion, of this, utopian society of Marxism where everybody is equal and you have the vanguard of the proletariat taking care of you, and you're going to have a new way forward because what you have now is a very, very difficult life. Well, they're failing to admit that the difficult life that we have, that we need a new way forward, they caused, and they're not going to fix it. And everybody who buys into that, thinking that they're looking at the truth, are just being fooled by this illusionary bubble that the Democrat Party and their, complicit media supporters and the oligarchs who fund them are creating. And, let's just hope that over 50% of America isn't buying it.
You will own nothing and be happy.
Absolutely, because your neighbor will own nothing and be equally happy.
Mm-hmm. But the elites are going to have everything. They're going to have it all, and they're going to be living what? Not the American dream anymore, but what? The worldwide dream?
Well, and again, this is one of the problems, that this is one of the weaknesses of the elites. They don't even know how to talk about what the struggles are of average Americans, particularly if they are third or fourth generation, elites. They can't even comprehend, the message that Trump is putting forth. And he understands that because throughout his entire life, he was depending upon the working class, to basically do his developments. He understood, those of us who work in construction, we understand the importance of people who will show up every day on time, work in bitter cold and hot sun, and basically create things, create value where there was nothing.
Right.
And how those people are looking to be rewarded, with their pay, their benefits, because their interest is their family, their children, the education. And that's the American dream. And that's really what's being under attack here now by this illusionary bubble created, by those here in the Democrat Party, their oligarchs, and I'm going to say contributed to by the globalists, who would like nothing more than to see an America that was controlled by a small elite cadre that they could then control and also then profit worldwide. And so we were up against some very difficult forces, but particularly, I'm relying on our veterans. We've reached out to a lot of them to say, it's time to answer your oath once again. You need to be the voice in your community, even if everybody else is being silent because they don't want to create a hassle. You need to be the one who speaks out, because when you speak out, whether it's at a community meeting or even just in a general discussion, I guarantee you a brother, sister, veteran will be right there along your side in probably less than 30 seconds. And one will become two, and two will become 10. And 10 will become 100, and 100 will become 1,000, and 1,000 will become 10,000. And that's what it will take to basically elect Donald Trump president and control the Senate.
Amen. And this administration, one word, demoralizing the average American. And you were talking about the worldwide elites and oligarchs and all these communists would love to see America just in shambles. Well, we are on our knees right now. This administration has put us on our knees, and this is it, folks. We have 21 in a wake up to save America. And I sincerely believe if we do not put Donald Trump in the White House in 21 in a wake up, we will have nothing left of this country. It will be goodbye. 250 years of service, sacrifice, blood, sweat, tears. We need to keep the Liberty Bell at home here ringing, folks, from sea to shining sea. And I have hope, I have faith that we will do that. Admiral, I've got a very, very serious question for you here, because I hear a lot of it in the mainstream media right now. There are some saying out there that this Trump assassination attempt was fake. The one out in Butler, Pennsylvania, I believe. Correct me if I'm wrong, but what do you have to say about that?
Well, my roots are in Pennsylvania, just not too far from Butler, just a little bit east of Pittsburgh. My sister still lives just north of Pittsburgh. She and my nephew were at the rally where he was shot at, and her feedback was, as they were going in, there was the normal lines and checking and everything, but once they were inside, they looked at the overall perimeter, and they felt like there really wasn't a secure outer perimeter. They saw people lining up on the outside of the fence, some just wanting to see, others passing things through the fence, over the fence, and the feeling of kind of lack security. And everything that I've heard from her and others and have seen, it was almost like the Homeland Security and the Secret Service and others really didn't care much, about it, rationalized it, that he wasn't the president. They had to give security to Joe Biden and his wife and others, and they put the Z team on it. Within Homeland Security, you have the Secret Service, but you also have a lot of other federal agents. And so they were basically staffing it with those folks who did not know how to command and control a site where you had to integrate local security along with the Secret Service security, because most of them were not trained Secret Service agents. And the question that I have is, how did this guy figure that all out and be able to do it on his own? He had to be groomed by somebody, whether it was by his parents, whether it was by social media, whether it was overt, because he basically showed a high level of skill in how he reconned the site, how he gone into the site, how he basically positioned himself. And so, I think it's a very real assassination attempt, by the providence, of the Lord. He survived it. But I really think that it was, somewhat purposeful neglect, on the part of the people who were supposed to protect him. And again, in the past, even before in 2016, he had his own, security at these rallies and all that before he could even get Secret Service protection. But then he was not necessarily such a threat, not only to the political order within the Democrat Party, but into the global order. And so I think now people realize, what the threat is, and this coordination between the locals who set the outer perimeter and the Secret Service who set the inner perimeter, I think is probably better. I know I went to the rally he had just a little bit before the Butler rally here in Virginia Beach, and the outer perimeter was locked down by the local police. I mean, I had a tough time getting through myself, there, and they also had a big field like this, a crowd about the same size and buildings, but you got the feeling when you went through the outer perimeter and then through the inner perimeter that this place was locked down. My sister said she didn't get the same feeling, in Butler. So I think it was a very real attempt, and you can imagine, what would have happened had this guy succeeded. The only thing that I'm wishing is that, we could have somehow stopped him, without putting a bullet in his head, so that we could have figured out more clearly who was behind it. And I'm hoping that the kind of the career agents within the FBI, are actually running the leads on this, because the threat isn't over at this point.
Well, he's dead for a reason. They don't want him talking, like you said, could be purposeful neglect. And, it's just that is unforgivable. And it is absolutely just egregious to even think of anything like that is even possible of even happening in the United States of America. But again, we are in some unprecedented times here and some very dangerous territory, if you will. Now, what was your...
One other thing, by the way, for those veterans that are listening, I think they'll agree that there's nothing more invigorating than to be shot at and missed. And it also showed the true mettle of President Trump. When he was shot at, he didn't cower in fear. He knew what his job was, what his role was, and he had to stand up. And my sister said the same thing. When he stood back up and pumped his fists in the air and everybody started shouting USA, USA, she said what she was amazed at, nobody ducked for cover. Nobody ran. He was there. They were there. There could have been other shooters. All of those people in Butler, Pennsylvania were true American heroes. And as long as that feeling, of we are going to resist, these threats to our Constitution, to our democracy, as a unified group, that's what it's going to take. And there are Americans, that feel that way. And let's just hope they all get to the polls, because that's what it's going to take to get this back on the right plane. But it was an amazing day in Butler. I wasn't there, but listening firsthand accounts from my sister, is probably even more amazing than the media portrayed it to be, and more dangerous than people thought, even after he survived the shooting.
Yeah, incredible. And nobody cowered. What was your family's reaction immediately after the shooting?
Well, I was watching it on TV, and as soon as I heard the first shots, I recognized that this was gunfire, and I immediately said they're shooting at him. And it was hard to tell. What I heard was 3 shots that I knew were 5.56 rounds, but then I heard the other shots, which maybe they were further away, whatever, but I thought the 5 other shots came from a lower caliber rifle. So I don't know, but again, they're saying that all 8 shots, were 5.56 rounds. So the again, the feeling was, can't believe it, and all that. And like I said, I knew my sister was there, and as soon as she was hard to get through on the cell phone, but I called her, as soon as I could get through, and she was fortunately already, able to get off the site and to leave. She was in the process of leaving when I talked to her, but her firsthand accounts were chilling.
Yeah, they must have had eyes on this shooter, because immediately after he fired those 3 shots, he was gone.
Yeah, but there were, he like I said, there were 8 shots, and so I don't know from what they were saying, but yeah, and again, they were showing ahead of time the 2 the snipers, one with the tripod or with the bipod, and the other one with the scope. They kept showing them, and as it turns out, where they were positioned, they couldn't even see him, and it was somebody else who apparently took him out. So there's a lot of questions as to even the snipers, the counter snipers that were there, how were they coordinated? Why didn't they get the word? And again, we're talking about the lack of command and control. And, they're starting to basically say that this was a group of people who were not necessarily qualified, including the team leader. And I don't know if we've even been told who the team leader was or what their background was, but I suspect it was not one of their top flight agents.
Yeah, the scary thing is that rifle that was on that tripod, the counter, snipers, they did not even have to move that rifle.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
It was already, those shots rang out, and then it was already, it was already sighted in. I didn't see any movement of that rifle, so it was almost like they had eyes on him.
Yeah, but I thought that they said that somebody else took him out, not that guy who was that was close to him. But that's what I'm saying. Nobody really knows. But I think what we do know, it was a serious attempt, and Trump was spared, by the providence of the Lord, really.
Thank God.
And again, and I remember when I was at the rally a few weeks before, it was closer to the end of his talk when he turned around and had the big slide with the the illegal immigrant graph on it and all of that, and he used that towards the end of his presentation. Here he somehow referred to it sooner, and even he says, I don't usually bring it up that early, but he did, and he turned his head, and when you see some of the simulations as to what could have happened, right there, it was really surreal. And the fact that it just glazed his ear, I had a Seabee in a firefight during the battles in Fallujah, where we were building a berm to basically contain the insurgents within the city. And same thing happened to him. He had a round go and just, sliced the end of his ear. A lot of blood, but he was good. Gave him a Purple Heart and a commendation medal, and he just kept on working. But again, it's close calls are something that you really can't explain. Why you survived it.
Divine intervention. There's no other words for it. Admiral, I have a question for you when it comes to Operation Aurora that President Trump has just put out about his eradicating and deporting these international gangs that have taken over the streets of America. And just how realistic is a mass deportation plan for America?
Well, Operation Aurora, I don't know if you've been to Aurora, but it's going out there towards the airport, and you have the lot of hotels springing up there, but huge amounts of apartments and housing being built there as people are leaving the West Coast, leaving downtown Denver, moving out there as all these illegal immigrants come in. And so it's an area that is expanding rapidly. I don't know if you saw the exchange yesterday with J.D. Vance, when he was talking to the pseudo journalist, and she was saying, well, hey, it was just a couple of apartment complexes with no big deal. And he says, listen to yourself. Yeah. We have apartment buildings being taken over by cartel gangs. Mm-hmm. And you're saying it's okay. In their mind, that's fine. It's just small little riffraff, it doesn't really affect them. I would have come back and said, and she was saying, well, yes, but they didn't invade the city of Aurora. They just a couple of apartments. And I would say to her, when the soldiers hit the beach at Normandy, are you saying they did not invade France because they weren't in Paris yet? Of course we were invading France. Of course they were invading, Denver and the city of Aurora. And that's just the first vanguard of the invasion. As far as deporting, I think when you listen to the details of Trump's plan, and J.D. Vance has articulated it pretty well, it's the idea that number one, you lock down the border. Number two, you stop the money flowing to these people through the NGOs. And number three, you require employers to use E-Verify. And what you do is you get to the point where a lot of people, will basically have to self-deport. But you're not going to worry about them initially. You're going to go after the gangs, the cartels. You know where they are. It's almost going to be like an Elliot Ness operation going after them, the mafia. You're going to have to go there, with a concerted effort. You know where they are. You're going to start, and kind of genius to basically cite this law 1798, where you can basically, deport people who are looking to do harm to America that are illegally here without necessarily pushing them through a court, because we won't have to deal, with all the lawyers. You basically push them out. And I think there's other things that can be done, to get a lot of this self-deportation to happen, including, potentially, and this is just my idea, nobody else's, you could have a certain period of time of a moratorium, that if you were a legitimate, legal, not legal, but a legitimate good person who came here with the hope of a better life, and you would self-deport within a certain period of time, you could get in line to come in legally. And once that time has passed, then it's open season on anybody to push them back. But I think it'll take some time to do it, but the message will get out initially, and particularly when we start to turn ICE loose, when we basically, don't take the issue of where we can't get detainers and things like that. And some of these people in the cartel, once the heat is on, some of them are going to stand and fight. The others are going to leave and look for easier targets. So it just has to start pushing it back. and we have to do this in a way where we go after the evil people, first, and the others, if they can come here, legally after self-deporting, better for them. But I think that's what we have to get to. And if we have both the House and the Senate, maybe it is time to do some real effective, border control and immigration legislation. Because again, my grandfather was an immigrant, came through Ellis Island, when he was 17, worked in the coal mines until he got enough money to buy a farm. And, he basically, lived the American dream, but the result of a lot of risk taking early in his life and a lot of hard work. And I think that part of the immigration process needs to be preserved. The rest of this, and particularly the trafficking of children and women, needs to be shut down hard. And I think Trump's the guy who can do it.
You talk about self-deporting, and I could see that being, very realistic, but at the same time, don't you think that there's far too many sanctuary cities out there and counties and states that the incentives will be just too great for these people to actually self-deport because they're living off the government, basically?
Yeah, well, the one thing all these sanctuary cities have is federal aid flowing into them. That can be stopped, almost immediately. And then you have to hope that the citizens of those cities decide that they want to get a change of their government as well. But you're going to have to stop where the federal funds are flowing that are allowing cities to be sanctuary cities. And again, a lot of this is not just Homeland Security; it's Health and Human Services, which has the money that's flowing into these NGOs who are making, I call it huge profits. They're nonprofit organizations, but they all get paid 3-figure salaries, and they're all making, a lot of money, basically picking up these refugees after they clear their 24 to 48-hour processing by the Border Patrol. They pick them up and they fly them, they bus them, they do whatever. And again, they're looking to control. But the one thing they don't do is they don't keep track of the kids, and they're busing them some places to people who are, quote, their aunt and uncle, who end up being people who are running a stash house, and then these kids are being exploited. And that's the real tragedy. And I think it'll start to be uncovered, once Trump starts going after the cartels, and we're going to see some real horror stories. And but it'll probably take several years, to get back to normal. But we've got to shut down the border first, and that's doable.
We have got to protect our nation's sovereignty. Without sovereignty, you're not a nation. And that's what so many folks out there just don't understand. I can't see how any American can be happy with the state of our nation right now. I mean, is Biden even the president?
Well, again, it seems like a lot of these people are happy. They think that this is okay. I guess I don't understand it, but I can't really think that every one of these folks that are in blue states, supporting sanctuary cities, working to elect Democrats, I can't hardly believe that they really want it to be this way. Is it that they're all corrupted by a desire for power, or their egos so attached to their politics that if they don't elect their leaders, they feel like they're, a lesser person? Have they been just totally duped by this illusionary bubble that says that Trump is a dictator, he's going to take away their rights and all this stuff? I really don't get it. It's hard to understand it, even when, I spend a lot of time also just listening to the other side, and they're truly delusional, and they think that we're crazy. So we have, half the country thinking the other half is crazy, and at least we'll try to settle it in an election, but it's going to be a, shall we say, sporty election, for sure.
These folks are easily influenced, and they're extremely vulnerable, and they have been duped by their own party. And look, let's face it, every American has been gaslit, since, 2020. And it's been so bad now that the average American don't even trust the government. And that's not healthy for a nation to say, man, I don't trust the FBI or the DOJ or DHS. Are they working in my best interest, or are they working against me, my neighbor, and the American people. And that right there is what we need to retake and recapture in this country. And I think there's only one man that can do that, and that would be President Donald J. Trump. And that is why it is imperative that everybody get out to the polls, especially veterans. You have an oath. That oath never expires. We need to get up. We need to stand up. We need to get out there, vote, put eyes and ears in all these poll stations, and ensure that President Trump is nominated or is elected to save America, because that's where we're at, folks. We need to save America.
And I think what you'll find is, the day after he's elected, long before January 21st, you'll begin to see his influence on both domestic and international politics. The key is going to be whether he can get, his team and the right team, in place, by the end of January.
Yeah.
So we can move forward because, the team that he brought with him to begin with in 2016, unfortunately, was basically influenced by some folks who didn't serve him well, who had political, payback debts that they had to do. And a lot of folks who went into the government, particularly a lot of them who are now basically trashing him because he fired them, were not necessarily the right kind of folks to support what he was doing. I think he realizes that in 2020, America never got to see the team that he had lined up, but he had a powerful team lined up to go in and replace some of the folks who were failing us, even in his administration. I have confidence that he'll do that again. The question is, can we get the people confirmed? Because otherwise, the true deep state, will still be there. They'll still be fighting against him, and he'll have a hard time getting things, accomplished early on, other than issuing executive orders.
Well, listen, we got 21 in a wake up to save America. And I say save America, guys. Look, this is it. Our backs are up against the wall. We've been backed into a corner. We need to save this constitutional republic. Freedom. With freedom comes great responsibility. And it is our responsibility to keep this country alive. We have sacrificed far too much to cut and run because these colors don't run. Admiral, thank you so much for joining us today. It has been a great pleasure. And I know your time is very valuable. I know your opinion matters to so many folks out there. So I sincerely appreciate you, your insanely honorable and admirable service to this nation, past and what you're doing right now for veterans, for America first, sir.
Well, Brian, I want to commend you and thank you for your continued call to action among veterans, because we do need to continue to serve. We need to be the spokesman in our community, and we need to stand up and protect our democracy in its truest sense, including the Bill of Rights. So thank you very much. I enjoyed being with you this morning.
Yes, sir. And I'll check back in with you here perhaps a day or two after the election, and hopefully we'll be able to have a nice cheers, if you will, virtual cheers to say we have and we will save America.
Looking forward to it. Thanks, Brian.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Folks, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the program. It has never been easier to listen to this podcast. We're on Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, Amazon Music. We're on iHeartRadio. We are on X. Simply search Today with Tally. Also learn more about me and my personal story, and even get my new book over at briantally.com. That is briantally.com. There it is, folks, right there. I didn't choose this job. It chose me. It's a very good read, very inspirational story on perseverance, resilience, and never giving up. Folks, remember to stay inspired, stay encouraged, stay motivated, and always stay in the fight. Until next time, for the Today with Tally podcast, this is Brian Tally. Good night, Semper Fi. God bless.
This is the Today with Tally podcast.